Hey everybody, Jim Benton here, CEO of Chorus. I am with Alex Buckle, CEO of Forecastable, VP of Sales at Perkuto. Am I saying that right, Alex?
Perkuto, close.
Perkuto. All right. We'll leave it there. But great to have you with us today. I'm fired up to talk about enterprise motion, how things are different in the way that we're engaging people today. But before we get into all of that, I know you and I were supposed to meet weeks ago, and it was just the events of January and everything going on just didn't feel right. I personally didn't feel like I wanted to be doing this in the early part of January. So thanks for your flexibility.
You're very welcome.
Looking at your flag and knowing that you're a veteran, I'm curious sort of your story, and just the great service you've done.
Sure. So in terms of the history of the flag, so I was in the Marine Corps, and I was stationed in Iwakuni, Japan, which is just outside of Hiroshima. I was 18 years old, so a very young Marine. So I got to experience kind of that side of World War II and go to the museums in Japan. And it was just a heck of an experience. And then a couple of years ago, when I was at Club with Marketo/Adobe, we were in Maui, and we decided to head over to Pearl Harbor and just to visit it. I've never been before. It was my first time to Hawaii as well. And so, they fly a flag every single day on the USS Missouri. They call it the Mighty Mo. And so we bought one of the flags and had it framed, and it's just a good reminder. So I enjoy it.
Well, awesome. Appreciate the service, and
Very welcome.
Thanks for sharing. Well, Alex, we got a lot going on in this world right now, from a shifting out of that, but into sales, and just, sales gets to solve the world's problems. It's a little bit different today in COVID, especially in the enterprise motion, which I wanted to get your perspectives on.
Sure.
And so let me jump into a little bit of the data, if that's helpful.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So the first data point that we pulled today is looking specifically at how many stakeholders are in the deal, especially by deal size. And when you look at the 100K deals, we're seeing somewhere, just over 5 key stakeholders in the buying decisions. Wanted to get a sense from you, as you've looked at the transitions this year, of how we're engaging these people today, now that we're a year into work from home, and how do we think that's going to change over the next, few months as things start to open up?
Obviously the engagement's all gone virtual, right? So there's a lot less, in face-to-face relationship building, which is really hard for those of us that were dependent on it. It was nothing for me to head up to Atlanta for a day and then have a dinner with a prospect or a customer, and you just can't do that nowadays. So you have to find, other unique ways to connect, and it's not necessarily even like just about who was specifically identified as the stakeholders or called out by name. Finding the hidden ones is a really big part of that exercise. So it's interesting how you had like the 5, which is very believable. I would say that's pretty accurate. But for my own personal process is I tend to, I find those named stakeholders, and through LinkedIn Sales Navigator and things like that, I tend to work my way all the way up to the C-suite and visualize that in org chart format, or what we call a buyer map. And just that exercise alone of mapping that org out from your named stakeholders to the C-suite, you'll uncover stakeholders that you weren't aware of. So like if I see a VP of sales on the East Coast and I know that he's directly involved, or, then there may be another VP that's covering Central or West, and I need to get them in that buyer map because they may have influence while they're not directly involved in the deal. They may have influence in relationships, and you as an account executive should be exploring those every which way.
Alex, have you been on planes? Have you been traveling recently, or are you still all remote?
So we're all remote. We're not doing any business travel. I've done a little bit of personal travel, I think just for sanity's sake, just to get out there and see the real world again. But other than that, we've not been traveling.
There's a lot of dialogue about, hey, we don't need to go see our customers anymore. Virtual works. And I've got strong opinions about this, and we can share, but what's your view of that? Do you believe that you're building the trust up? You're bringing people together right now, effectively, fully remote?
Yes, but it's harder. And so for me, the way I've always sold is I've always been very customer centric, right? So I'm always focused on their needs. And I've been able to build strong relationships with my prospects and my customers because they can see that passion for what I do. They know that I care about achieving the outcomes that they're looking to achieve. And so for those reps that were not laser focused on the customer's needs, they're probably struggling right now. It's like, hey, I can't just, quickly go out and grab a quick dinner. And like I said before, to grab a quick dinner, and that's how I build my relationship. And I hope that dinner, maybe gets me a yes. Like that's not how it works anymore.
Interesting. A completely different playbook on that. Now, as the world starts to open back up, whenever that might be, do you expect that we'll be back on planes fairly frequently and getting back in? And what will be different when we go out there?
I think we will see people getting on planes again. I think it's going to start with conferences and people getting used to that.
Yep.
And then slowly but surely, you're going to start seeing, I think you're going to start seeing face-to-face meetings again. You know, for some deals, it's important, especially for sizable enterprise deals, right? If you're doing a $10 million deal, you know, it's like, it's good for that group on the buying side and the selling side to get together and meet one another and understand each other on a personal level, because that's a major transaction and it's a major financial commitment for the buyer. And so I think that face-to-face interaction just gives you more confidence.
Makes sense. You know, one of the things that we're seeing in the calls is a heck of a lot more CXOs involved in the interactions. Yeah. So I'll show you the most recent data we have on this. Sure. This is basically looking at, you know, year over year from the buying side, CXO participation. You can see last year, it really jumped up as we got into, you know, work from home, transition. And as the kicking off this year, you know, it's continuing to go up. So 40% higher year over year. We're seeing it both on the selling and buying side. But this means that we have more access to leadership. They're showing up in these interactions. We're also seeing that they show up sometimes more unprompted than before. They're not on the invites. They used to be on the invites. Now they're just showing up to the meetings. How have you seen this resonate in the deals, and what impact is this having on the process?
So touching on I guess on the invites first, because that's like the easiest one, is just as a seller, if you know, someone in a C-suite role just randomly shows up to your meeting, like that happens, and it happens more often now than before. You should always have C-suite messaging kind of at the ready, both in terms, you know, your value proposition should be at the ready and just, you know, for the C-suite, and that's really it there. So always be on your toes and be ready for that C-suite person to step in. Now, in terms of, you know, how often are CXOs in deals, you know, it really depends on what you're selling and its impact on the C-suite's priorities. So if the value that your product or service doesn't warrant the C-suite's attention, you're likely not going to get it. And so wherever possible, you've always got to find a way to tie yourself to the C-suite or board level objectives.
You mentioned having C-suite level content at the ready. What's an example of that? What's the type of content that's different for them than you might normally have?
So for us personally, right? So we have a framework we leverage that kind of articulates the value of what it is that we deliver. And right. And so when I'm speaking to an individual rep or I'm speaking to a frontline sales manager, I have this framework, and it tends to be very tactical because that's what they care about. They're in the weeds. They're fighting day to day, trying to get deals done. But if a chief revenue officer all of a sudden popped into my meeting, you know, I'm not going to say, hey, you know, we're focused on centralized communication. No, we're focused on all-inclusive team selling. Instead of saying we're focused on, you know, granular coaching, you know, we're focused on fully leveraged sales leaders, right? So you just have to make sure that whatever message you state, it resonates with your audience. So just know your audience pretty much.
Our data shows that when a CXO is involved in those calls, it has a 34% increase in win rate. So we want them to show up. It's helping to drive these deals.
I mean, as long as you don't mess up the call, you should be good.
That's right. We don't win them all.
You don't win them all. But
well, a couple other data points that were interesting is looking at just how much time we're investing in the deals, especially looking at, you know, time. So on the left is time between first and last meetings. So basically this, the middle part of a sales cycle, closed won versus closed lost. You can see on the larger deals, we're clearly investing, you know, 2x the amount of time to get these deals done. On the right, we're looking at the number of meetings per deal, and, you know, continually seeing, you know, the increase. We're investing more on the larger deals. That's obvious. We're seeing that it's taking close to 6 meetings to get these larger deals done on average on the segments. Yep. You know, one of the other data points, I don't have it right here, is that when you look at this compared to last year, the number of meetings is up dramatically. I mean, it's up 50+%. We're having to meet a lot more to both win or lose a deal. Are you seeing that in your deals?
Yes, and it's tiresome too. I think it touches on a couple of topics, I think. So one, I'm starting to see my calendar fill up. Like every little gap now is filled with a meeting, and it's painful at times, right? And so I think as a seller, if I had to give any advice out there, you know, you need time for yourself. Don't let everybody fill in every little gap. Block off time for, you know, just block off the time to to just be you and just focus on what you need to focus on and not being so reactive in every single meeting. So I am seeing that across the board.
I feel like everybody, to that last point, the calendars are really filling up because we can't do the light chat in the kitchen. I'm seeing it more this year than even the end of last year. It is interesting, and the days are kind of getting stretched. Is there any unique tricks that you've done with your team to block that time, or to find other ways to actually get human connection that doesn't take 30-minute blocks?
So we haven't, I have no tricks, I would say, other than, for me personally, I put meetings on my calendar just to block time. And just to give me a little bit of free time to catch up on email. Cause otherwise I find myself now in the early mornings and the late nights, that's when I'm getting a lot of my work done. And then from 8 to 6 is just meeting after meeting after meeting. And it's hard.
It's challenging. It's funny. I do the same thing. I've got meetings, and it's not the hold, because holds get booked over. It is, old family member names, whatever it is, that just, I know what it is, but you got to protect this time and make sure that it doesn't actually get booked over. So it makes a ton of sense.
Yes.
Let's jump into, what's that, Alex?
Well, I was going to talk about, because you mentioned, how much time, is the team investing, in the deals. And so frankly, I mean, that comes down to identifying the winnable deals. Like what you just showed there was interesting, because you spend just as much time on the losers than you do on the winners.
That's right.
And so, you got to figure out, as a sales organization, that those postmortems, those win-loss analyses are really important. So you've got to figure out, hey, one, why did I lose, right? And you've got to objectively determine what that is. And then two, you have to think, okay, now that you have the lost reason, was this a winnable deal? You can't help it, for the most part, if your competition's out innovating you, they just have a better product that's solving the buyer's problems in a better way. But your goal as a seller should always be to win 100% of the winnable deals. So winnable is defined as, you've got to qualify them, right? And so I think, how do you qualify that? So you have to say, could my company's product or service meet the buyer's desired outcomes for this purchase?
Yeah.
If yes, it's a winnable deal. And you need to focus on your sales process to figure out why you lost. Because if it was a winnable deal, you should have won.
It's a great point. And I think I'm seeing this across the board. If we don't do that qualification, it's easy to meet people right now, easy to get an extra Zoom link and off we go. But as the data showed, we're having almost 2x the meetings. I think we went from 2.8 meetings on an average closed loss last year to 4.1, and we went from 3 on a closed one to about 6, at almost high fives. So you're right. If we don't do that qualification, boy, that's a ton of time that we're now going to lose in this process, and the days are already pretty full.
Yes, and nailing that qualification process, like that postmortem analysis, is really important. And so you've got to build a process to kind of objectively, gather win-loss reasons. And you can do that, internally, using internal resources. There are companies that specialize in just calling on these prospects, and you get a lower level person that was, semi-involved in the deal, no real influence, but they know exactly what happened. And they'll take that $50 Starbucks gift card all day long and tell you exactly why you lost to a disinterested third party. And so, I see some sales leaders say, oh, it's too expensive for me to invest in that. It costs so much money, and it is expensive. But if you think about all that time that's spent on the lost deals, when you improve that qualification process through that win-loss analysis, it just pays dividends. Those are hard costs that you can quantify.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you do the math and you look at what the cost of these leads are for these enterprise leads, where $50 gift card doesn't mean much when you think about what we're actually doing to invest in these.
Correct.
I'm curious, Alex, on just for the enterprise motion, the first calls today, have your first calls, the way you engage in that first interaction, both, you're having to qualify, it is more remote, people are busier. Have you done anything different in your first call motion?
I would say the best thing, what we've done differently is looked at, who responds. So I know we're going to, it's about, I guess how quickly you respond to that initial inquiry is one, really important.
Yeah.
And two, I think the who of that, who responds to that initial inquiry, I think there's room for change there. And so if I have, let's say that initial inquiry comes from a VP or an SVP at a large enterprise company, why would I have the SDR follow back up? Yes, the SDRs are perfectly qualified to follow up and like pre-pandemic and stuff like that. But why not white glove it a little bit up front and say, you know what, maybe I'm going to have my VP respond and have him say, hey, I'm Alex Buckholz, the VP of sales at Perkuto. And, here, let me introduce you to an account executive. Here's what we're all about. By the way, I'm going to participate in that first call. And you white glove it a little bit, and that sets you apart from the competition.
I love
and it
that.
gives you a little bit of executive alignment up front too, because now you've got VPs aligned, which you may need in the last mile trying to get the deal done.
I mean, were you thinking about that pre-work from home, or is that some of the newer thinking just in this era?
That's newer thinking in this era. I mean, we didn't really do that before. It was pretty much a standard process: inbound lead, SDR follows up, initial quick qualification through whatever methodology you use, and then that's it. But you've got to change it up to stand out.
I love it, Alex. I always talk about how I think we're seeing some of the best selling in a decade right now, but that's the stuff where the authenticity, the reinvention of the playbook, kind of just being present. That's an awesome play that you just called out. And we all should be doing that. I think some of the rhythms that we had pre-built allowed for bloat and things to kind of slip through the cracks. And today we all need to be more focused on this. So appreciate that. Let's jump into a couple more stats here. Sure. One of the other areas is looking at just the change in deal value from the start, from first call, when you kind of initially set the value to where it actually lands when we finish the deals. So on the larger enterprise segment, about 30%, 35% of the deals will increase in value over time, but 39% decrease. So more of the deals will actually shrink in that segment over time, which is different. The other two segments typically do increase over time. Why do you think that is? Why is it that we're setting our goals higher, our opportunity values are higher, and we're not living up to them in our deals?
I'm not sure, frankly, why we're not living up to them in the deals. I mean, but these stats aren't surprising to me quite a bit, because I expect more decreasing than increasing on enterprise, because folks usually start higher and negotiate down. You always, a good enterprise salesperson is put out list price. They'll negotiate themselves. You don't negotiate against yourself, so you always start higher. I saw that the middle of the road there was pretty much 50-50, so that was kind of expected. And on the bottom end, I'm not surprised that the deal size increases, because most of the folks that are on the bottom end are focused on that initial price. And once a salesperson gets in there and starts articulating the value of bigger packages, other add-ons, of course, through value statements and stuff like that, I'm not surprised at all that they buy more. So it starts lower and goes up.
Do you think during the work from home aspect, we're seeing deal sizes come down a little bit less risk up front, and then prove the value over time and expand these deals?
I haven't seen that in our book of business. I haven't seen that. I mean, I've seen that probably not any more than I normally saw it before. On the services side, we may get some customers that will say, hey, we just want to try you out for a few months. Let's make sure our engagements go well. And we get through the first few months, and then we end up with a year or two contract. But that's pretty standard for us as is. Nothing's changed.
All right. What you're talking about response times. This is the data that we were looking at today. Specifically, how does the response time affect the outcomes of the deals? And we're looking at email response time and just the speed. When we're winning deals, the response time is within 2 hours, and when we're losing deals, it's within 8 hours. And it is a sign. And I think you can see this naturally when you have momentum. But it's an interesting data point when you start to actually connect it to the won-loss data. What are your thoughts about this?
I mean, response times are absolutely important. You should be responding as quickly as humanly possible in your process. Obviously, you need to make sure, that you're doing the proper responses and the proper person is following up. You can't rush through it. But it's important to have a super fast response time. Now, I think additionally, response time isn't just like at the initial, at the beginning of the cycle either. It can have a really nasty cascading effect kind of throughout the entire sales org. And it's not, again, just the initial response time, it's response time throughout the cycle. So anytime you can even just save one day in the cycle, like you increase your chances of success, right? And so if you're not in this habit of urgency and your competitor is, you could still be going through the demo phase while your competitors already moved on through to pricing and is working on the business case, in collaboration with your prospects. So now they're building a deeper relationship than you are. And so when I talk to reps and in my own work, I'm very focused on as quickly as possible, get that sense of urgency yesterday.
It is interesting when things are simple, it's easy to respond fast. And when
Yes.
things are complex or there's ambiguity, it slows everything down and it shows in the data. You can sense the
Absolutely.
risk.
Absolutely.
Hey, Alex, any other thoughts for the enterprise folks that are listening? And you've been so deep on this space as you look at the world today and you think about this year ahead. Any other observations or thoughts that you're thinking through?
Process is king. I mean, find your sales process, and it's not methodology. Methodology is very different from process. That qualification methodology we talked about before, that's important to just have some sanity and maintain, some free time in your calendar. Don't try to book every meeting or work every deal that comes across your desk. Qualify, qualify, qualify. And so I think that's the focus right there is to qualify so you can have some type of a stable life, I think, as a seller nowadays.
Last year we were looking at some of the data and burnout was showing up, 20% and increases. And so I think your point about just the sanity and protecting our calendars is very relevant right now for a lot of folks, especially as we just went through SKOs. I think everybody's been going through a pretty busy time period of kicking off the year. So.
Yes. And with calendars being filled, you don't have the time to waste. So that process becomes really important.
Yeah.
Stick to the process. If the other side isn't playing along or it's not a two-way street, get out of it. Like they're wasting your time. Don't wait, just get out of the deal and move on to the next one that is willing to invest their time and have more of a trusted relationship there.
Alex, I love it. I really appreciate the guidance, the advice, and help us walk through the data today. Appreciate the time. I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You as well. Take care, Jim.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Cheers.